All right, we'll go ahead and get started. A couple quick things. One is that I am mostly through grading your exams. I was getting through all the essays and then my train was late yesterday. And so they started hauling ass to make up for it. And literally, like, I was trying to click things to grade and my laptop was like this. So I will try to get to the rest of the folks' essays today that I didn't get a chance to do because your grades wouldn't have made sense. So, it's always an adventure. But that is the end of the material that will be on exams that we're going to cover. What we are going to start doing now is our simulation. And I know a lot of people have a lot of like questions and anxiety about that. And that is why I give us a whole week for y'all to get set up. And today I'm going to spend the whole day basically explaining what the heck we're doing in a lot more detail. So you should have all received an email from me last Wednesday with your assigned role and the sheet for that. If for some reason you did not get that, email me and I will make sure I resend it. And so let me actually real quick show you. Show you how to get there. So if you are on the home page of our Blackboard page and you click Defining the Mind down here, it will take you to this section. You can see all the role assignments. So some of you on your pages will be like, you need to collaborate with this psychologist. And these folks, this will tell you who is who for that. And then you also will be able to access everything I'm going to go over today. And also, you have access to some primary source readings. I will be posting things like who's on what committee. And when we get our agenda, that will be posted here. And I also posted, just in case I don't get to post this video quickly, I posted from when I did this totally via Zoom in 2020, which was an adventure. I posted the video from when I explained it then. So if anyone is like, wait, I know Dr. Meyer said this in class, but I don't remember exactly what it is. You can watch me talk about it from my home office there. Okay, a few more folks are signing on. Just want to make sure they're getting checked off here. Go. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. So what we're gonna do today is again talk about how the heck we do this. On Wednesday and Friday, y'all are going to have the day to like talk to your classmates who are going to be your collaborators. Sit here and do research about your person. If you need to go to the library to look at, like actual books, you'll be able to do that. And then my goal over Wednesday and Friday is to meet with each of you individually for, just a couple minutes to answer questions you have, particularly about your part, or give you any little like clues that I have in my instructor's manual for your characters. So folks who are on Zoom, it would really behoove you to be here in person Wednesday and Friday so that you can collaborate. It's going to be a lot harder if you're on Zoom, but everybody else is in person. So, and then when we're doing the reacting, again, folks really need to be here in person unless you're sick. So that you can participate more readily. Alrighty. So then next Monday, 1 week from today, we are going to start the simulation. I find that it's helpful to kind of like get our feet wet before Thanksgiving, because otherwise it kind of like hangs over people like, oh my God, I have to do this thing, right? So at least if we do 1 day of it before Thanksgiving, everyone's like, oh, okay, that's not that bad. And then when we get back from Thanksgiving, you'll have another work day to be like, oh, now that I know what's going on, maybe I need to go to the library again, or maybe I need to like talk to these people who I'm supposed to be on a committee with. And then we'll have a full week sort of adjusted week of the simulation. And then I'm guessing because the class is pretty large this year. I think last year I only had like 17 people, and so we were sort of like not quite filling the time, but with 25 of y'all, we're gonna fill the time. So I'm guessing we'll need at least part of our scheduled exam time to finish it. Also during our scheduled exam time, Gabrielle, who's our honors student, is gonna present about her honors project, the data she's collecting. Yep, it's gonna go great. We had a little bit of IRB hiccup, so she's just getting started. And so the assignments that are due, I'm gonna explain these as we go through, but by Friday at midnight, you're gonna have an abstract due. An abstract is just a couple sentences about like what your speech is gonna be about. Each of you does have to give at least one speech as part of the game. And then on Monday, again, you can turn it either before or after class. You're gonna give me a summary of your strategy for the game. And so let me go up to the actual assignment here so that you all can sort of be reminded. And I tried to be as detailed as possible about how we're gonna go through this. In terms of the, and again, this got adjusted a little because of me adding an extra Monday. But so you all will again be checking in with me throughout this week, and then your abstract, 200 words or less. It's a preview of what you'll say in your speech. So some of you, it'll say you're supposed to present your research, right? There's a couple of researchers actually that we've talked about in class who are in the game, right? Some of you, it'll say you're supposed to give a proposal that everyone else is going to vote on. And that's going to be your speech to present your proposal. Some of you, it'll say you're on a panel with other people presenting your research or talking about a topic. And so you want to make sure you work with those other people. And some of you, it might say your job is to run for president. And then you of APA. And so then you would give a presidential, like basically candidate stump speech about why you'd be a good president. Some people, it'll say you need to do more than one speech. And that's fine. And then when you turn this in, just let me know if you have to give more than one speech, like which one you want me to grade. One thing people have done in the past is just turned in their whole speech as the abstract. It should only be a preview, right? Imagine if you were like going to an event, right? Or going to watch a movie. They wouldn't give you the whole script for the movie, right? They just give you a trailer. So your abstract is a trailer for your speech. The summary that's coming up due is your character's strategy based on the research you'll do this week and the talking you'll do with other folks. So some background on your person, ideally beyond just your character sheet. What opinions does your individual have? Some of them won't be very opinionated about anything other than like their research. That's all they care about. That's what they're here to present. What's your strategy? What are you going to try to do? And sometimes the end of your role sheet will be like, your goal is to do X. Yeah.
So basically the first assignment for this is that summary that's due on Monday.
The abstract is the first one, and that's due Friday. Yep. And that's so that over the weekend, sometimes I've had the program committee do this. I think I'll probably just do it myself to give the program committee a little slack because you have other stuff to do. But basically I create a program, a Google Doc, so we know who's presenting in what order, and the abstract helps with that. And then, yeah, and then the first like big assignment for it is the summary. And this is why a couple of people have been like, oh, I haven't been doing too well on the exams, Dr. Myers. Like the assignments for this, which people generally do well on them, you just have to turn them in, reminding people, turn things in. Are worth, I believe, like 200 points altogether. So it's like 2 exams. So that really helps people's grades. You also want to talk about how your strategy is fitting with the strategy with others. And again, for some of you, it might be, my person does not care what other people are doing, and that's fine. For other people, it will be, my person's got to work with this committee to do this and this like secret group to do that, right? And so then we're going to go through, you get points for doing your speech. And then if you don't do a speech, you get a 0 on the speech. I mean, that should be logical, but I've had people try not to give speeches in the past. And I'm like, that doesn't work. And then on the day of the exam, you're gonna turn in a reaction paper of like what happened and how close it was to what actually happened in real life.
First person, like I.
Exactly, yeah. So from now on, you're sort of, you are your character at this point. And I know for many of you, your character doesn't match your gender or sometimes your race, right? And that's okay.
Also, I think some of that's not supposed to, but if we have like more than one speech proposal, are we writing more than one abstract? as
Yes,
well?
yeah. And the other ones could be super short, you know, but the reason I need the abstracts is because when I put together that program, I'll put them in there. Because there might be someone who like their goal is to argue against yours, right? And so then they've got to sort of prepare after reading your abstract. Yeah, good question. So apologies, that does mean a little more work for some folks, but the ones you don't want me to grade could be super short. Just like, I'm gonna talk about Z, and that's fine. Good questions. This is why I do this day, so people can ask all the questions. So again, it's 200 points for all the steps, 2 exams worth. It really pulls up most people's grades, so. Alrighty, and I attached this to hopefully all of your sheets. I was working really fast the other day. Let me try to zoom in a little more. Perfect. So this is a basic how to do reacting to the past. So reacting to the past is a whole series of these types of games. Has anyone done them in any other classes? Okay, I know Dr. Hooker does them in some of her classes. In the past, Dr. Holzer has done some as well. And so they are in a whole bunch of other topics as well. This is the only psychology one and it fits so well in this class, which is great. But like, for example, there's ones about like Henry VIII. There's ones that would fit into classics classes about like Athens. So I went to a Reacting to the Past conference pre-COVID, so it's been a hot minute. And it's kind of cool how they teach you how to do this is you have to play the games. That's an instructor. And so I did one about like the Royal Society trying to decide whether they were gonna let Darwin get in or not. And I played this like astronomer who didn't like Darwin. And then I did another one that was about like revolutionary France, and it was all taking place in a salon. And I was the salon owner, or, yeah, I guess owner. So I basically just got to be a teacher and like tell people what to do when. And people were like, you're so good at this. And I was like, I'm literally just doing what I do in the classroom. Like, it's not that hard. And so, and again, it's totally up to you guys, but if you want to like dress your part a little, you can do that. There's one character who will is instructed, or like the original person was masked when they gave their speech. If you're that character and you want to wear a mask that day, go for it. Or if you want to try, I don't know if you want to try just like the 70s. Now that I think about it, maybe if you want to bust out the bell bottoms and stuff, go for it. But it is a possibility, not required. And so here is the setup. That's what we're doing today. So we're going to go over the game book. I'll show you where that's posted for you all as well. You basically get a lot of like good information, and then it will give you like, hey, here are some like primary documents to look up. The great thing about now is that you can probably find maybe even video if it was recorded, right? Or like texts of speeches just online, which is really cool. You know, I think that 10-15 years ago, that might not have been the case. And so often you will have to do some research to bolster your speeches. No one has to write a paper for this one. Some of them you do. Like we did one once on campus where there weren't enough people to do it, and so some faculty came in and subbed, and I was a reporter, so I had to like write articles. So in terms of gameplay, there will be certain people who preside over the sessions. So whoever is the president of APA on day one, you are gonna run the session, and that literally just means you say like, this person is next, and things like that. I will be the game master. So I'm gonna be like in the back of the room. I have like a crazy matrix of what I have to do while y'all are doing this. So I have like, let me find it. I have like cheat sheets for myself of like who's playing what character, and I mark when you talk for grading. I have actual grading sheets for your speeches. And then I also have something else that I'm blanking on. But I'm managing a lot because I'm being the game master and I'm grading you at the same time. So I might come and like pass you a note to be like, your character would say this or whatever. And it's not like I'm saying you're doing it wrong. I'm just trying to like help, basically. Honestly, this part was a little easier when we did it totally on Zoom because I just used the chat, but it's kind of fun to pass notes too. And then most role descriptions contain secret information that you're not supposed to tell other people. So if it says like your secret goal is this, or you're a member of this organization, but nobody knows, like don't tell people. It's kind of fun, right? You can sort of, again, as you make connections with other people who are in your factions. So here I've put your main factions, basically your theoretical leaning. So you'll see that there's cognitivists, behaviorists, and psychoanalysts. There's a lot of people who are independents who, again, are just like, I just want to present my research, or I just have other things I care about. But like, you know, if you're a behaviorist and you're trying to get something related to behaviorism passed, talk to the other behaviorists and be like, okay, who's going to speak up and support me? That type of thing. And then really immerse yourself in the game. So you're criticizing the character, not the other person, right? And then you want to always sort of back things up based on your research. And let's see. Some of this will suck. I think I might have mentioned to you guys way at the beginning of the semester, I posted the reacting sessions on YouTube, just like my other classes, when I did it totally on Zoom. And one of them got flagged as hate speech because there are characters in this game who think that homosexuality is a disorder. And we all are going to recognize that that is not that person's opinion necessarily, right? But that is the opinion of that person at that time. And so everyone knows you're playing a role. And I only gave those roles to people who on the survey said, I'm comfortable doing that, basically. So, because I don't want to make people do that. So again, make sure you're doing your reading. The speeches, make sure that you're prepared, right? And then make sure you're strategizing. So this is one of the reasons why Reacting to the Past is really liked by professors, is that it is yet another way to give you ways to think on your feet, ways to use critical thinking skills in like a really creative way, right? And these are all things that employers love. These are things that grad schools love. So these are things that if they end up being profound for you, you could talk about in a job interview or something like that. So I think the game book is much more helpful just because, again, it's specific to our particular game. This might not be bad. Now, one thing I will say is like, I think the only people who have ever played this one are like me and the dude who wrote it. So the game book is not like totally filled out. No, it's going to take a while to load because it's big. But it has enough for us to do what we need to do. So let me scroll by. The game book again is posted on your Defining the Mind section. If it's still being a butt over here, I might just open it there. Yeah, that's just going to be a lot easier. Okay, perfect. Go away, Lumen PDF reader. Okay. This will be much, much easier. The fun things that you have to figure out when you're a professor, like what's the best way to get the computer to actually do what you need it to do. All right, so what's our particular game about? So this is going to focus on intellectual conflicts in American psychology, but also psychiatry in the 1970s. The writer of the game kind of took liberties and combined the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association, so these people are interacting, and we just call it the APA. So a little bit of liberties, but a lot of the things we talk about now really came to pass in the 70s. So like the DSM making some pretty substantial changes, using medications, you know, thinking about theoretical cognitive versus behaviorism versus psychoanalysis. A lot of that happened then. So here's where he kind of talks about how he combined the two APAs. But these events did happen. So there are a lot of really interesting things that happened back then, and a lot of really cool research studies that we learn about in not only this class, but other psych classes that were presented at that time. And so the game where we're giving speeches takes part in the context of a conference, what I just went to, so I could definitely give you lots of things. You know, this single conference takes 1 week. It really, what I've discovered is with this game, it sort of like fluctuates depending on how many people need to speak each year and things like that. But I will, when I put together the program, make it super clear what year is when, because there are certain people who are like, in 1972, run for president, things like that. And again, as it mentions, there is a conference committee, but it's often easier for me to do this. All right, so this is the introduction. This sets the scene here. Yeah. Exactly. So usually we get through, I want to say 1973, but sometimes we get to 74. So
We started in 1970.
we started in 71. Yep. Yeah, good question. All right, so this literally happened. So there's APAs in DC. And you nervously check the entrance to the hotel. It's clear this year there's no throngs of protesters, but it's on face-to-face confrontation. That actually happened the previous year. So 1970 in San Francisco, when you arrived at the hotel, the entrance was completely blocked by an angry crowd of gay rights activists. And they do use the term gay, rather than like LGBTQ+, because that's what was used at the time. Individuals in the crowd were personally confronting, non-violently but aggressively, any psychologist, psychiatrist who appeared. The activists called it zapping, and you, as a mild-mannered academic, found it terrifying. There are rumors the FBI was in attendance last year. It's almost certain they're here now. The conference was almost shut down. WAPO covered the event and said the gay liberation and their women allies out-shrieked the head shrinkers. Wow, gotta love this. And took over the American Psychiatric Association session on sex. Before the morning was over, the 500 psychiatrists who gathered to hear scientific studies on sexual problems demonstrated that they were just as prone to antisocial behavior as anyone else. This lack of discipline is disgusting, said Dr. Leo Alexander. Then he diagnosed the problem of one of the lesbian protesters. She's a stupid fool, the doctor said, and a stupid bitch. Very professional. The conference was a circus. Young men dressed in flamboyant gowns streamed through the hallways. Sessions were disrupted by guerrilla theater, and an activist named Frank Hamney grabbed the microphone and shouted, "Psychiatry is the enemy incarnate. Psychiatry has waged a relentless war of extermination against us. You can take this as a declaration of war against you." It all culminated in a session featuring Irving Bieber, author of the 1962 study on homosexuality, published in his book. According to eyewitnesses, a protester interrupted Bieber almost before he started with the claim that "I've read your book, Dr. Bieber, and if that book talks about Black people the way it talks about homosexuals, you'd be drawn and quartered and you'd deserve it." Bieber tried to respond by claiming, "I never said homosexuals were sick. What I said is that they had displaced sexual adjustment." "That's the same thing, mother effer," yelled another. It was a watershed moment. Earlier this year, a meeting of the New York branch of the APA, so there are state organizations, a paper by Charles Socrates was interrupted by a handful of gay activists. The long-rumored shadow organization of homosexual psychiatrists called the Gay PA is no longer in doubt. The highlight of this year's program promises to be a symposium titled "Psychiatry, Friend or Foe to Homosexuals, a Dialogue." The panel includes Dr. Evelyn Hooker, one of the participants in last year's showdown, and the mysterious Dr. H. Anonymous, who claims to be both a licensed psychiatrist and a homosexual. Pearl gasping. Everyone knows a mentally ill person can't practice psychiatry. Again, believed at that time, not really believed now. Now it's like, just get yourself a therapist, you'll be good. And homosexuality at that time, it was in the DSM, it was a mental illness. This Dr. H. Anonymous, if he or she is telling the truth, is risking his or her license. But yet there must be more. We all know ever since Kinsey's famous study, this is Alfred Kinsey, who did studies in the 30s and 40s about human sexuality, that about 10% of the population identifies as primarily homosexual, while a significantly larger percentage have engaged in homosexual activity. That is true to this day. And in fact, some AIDS research actually, instead of talking about like LGBTQ plus people, will talk about like men who have sex with men, because those men may not identify as part of the queer community, but they're having sex with men, right? So, and ever since Hooker's paper in 1956, we know that most of this population are psychologically normal. Given the numbers attending this meeting, Dr. H. Anonymous surely can't be alone. On the other hand, Socrates and Bieber have called Hooker and Kinsey's data into question. If they're correct and only a small percentage of the population is homosexual, on what basis could we call it a normal behavior? Are homosexuals, as Bieber contends, individuals whose heterosexual function is crippled like the legs of a polio victim? What does it mean to be ill anyway? In October 1969, Time magazine had a cover story on the movement amongst homosexuals for greater social recognition, who called inverts. In the second paragraph, it referred to gay bars that proceeded to use the word gay without quotes. It even used the term gay marriage. I believe this was the first time that was used, like, in a news article. And the article, however, made the following claim. Most experts agree that a child will not become a homosexual unless he undergoes many emotionally disturbing experiences over the course of several years. A boy who likes dolls or engages in occasional homosexual experiments is not necessarily queer. Such activities are often a normal part of growing up. On the other hand, a child who becomes preoccupied with such interests or is constantly ill at ease with the opposite sex obviously needs some form of psychiatric counseling. While only about 1/3 of confirmed adult inverts can be helped to change, therapists agree a much larger number of pre-homosexual children can be treated successfully. And the treatment they're talking about here is conversion. Right, that was what they thought. It's really interesting. So the conference I attend is called the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. Conversion therapy is largely behavioral. And they talked in one of the talks that I went to, and I've heard about him before, about there was a version of this that happened at that conference as well. And there was a young grad student who was openly gay and gave a symposium. And the president of ABCT at that time happened to miss his train and was like, okay, I'll go to this talk. And it totally changed. The president of ABCT had been very pro conversion therapy. And after listening to this young person talk, he changed totally. And his presidential address was actually about how we shouldn't be using conversion therapy and how homosexual folks are not mentally ill. So really interesting that that was happening at other psychological conferences sort of in parallel. So these thoughts raise a larger specter. Are psychiatry and psychology scientific? Starting a decade ago, Thomas Zaz, professor of psychiatry at SUNY Health Science Center in Syracuse, has been arguing quite publicly that mental illness is a myth. This is a real dude, he's in the game. Had a whole thought about this. His ideas challenge the very foundation of his field. He's listed on the program, and you're excited to get a chance to discuss. At the same time, the president of APA this year is something of a revolutionary himself. George Miller has been arguing the existence of something called cognitive psychology, which directly challenges the 50-year tradition of limiting psychological research to observation, prediction, and control of behavior. For half a century, psychologists have been convinced that they cannot scientifically investigate unobservable entities like minds, but rather must study the behavior of an organism in its environment. Now that's being challenged. Can or should science be used to make the world a better place? All right, so these are some of the basic principles. I'm not going to read the whole thing at you all, but that first section kind of sets up the drama of it, right? Reputation. It's basically like your reputation is based on how good you do how well you do your research and how well it's accepted by other people. You want to challenge your, intellectual opponents, but you kind of have to try to be professional about it, right? We want to have scientific inquiry. We want to be able to replicate it. And academic culture relies heavily on reputation. It's generally assumed that academics are honest and their results could be replicated, but will not be. Conferences rely on a system of peer review to ensure the papers represent the best research possible, but peer reviewers are often selected by virtue of their reputation, not because of their knowledge about specific things, including the rules of order for a public meeting. And so, what we're trying to look at here is not entertainment value or anything like that, but insight and rigor of data collection. The president, again, it will start with George Miller, and then each year, which often ends up being like a day and a half, we will elect a new president, and then that person will run the next year's session. And then the president's main responsibility, including presiding over the meetings, and opening each conference with an address. So that would be the president's speech. Again, this is written as if I was going to spend the whole semester doing this. So it's like each week, blah, blah, blah. It's each amount of time we need to get through stuff, right? So there'll be a presidential address. There will be proposals, symposia, open sessions for current research, and then there'll be this business meeting where we vote on things like who's going to be the next president. So some folks have very specific goals in mind. So there is a group who are trying to make a task force within the APA. We're going to look specifically at what's a mental disorder and what should be in the DSM and what should determine that. The behaviorists, right, want to look at, how is behavioral impairment equivalent or not equivalent to mental illness? The psychoanalytic folks want to convince people that it's internal conflicts that are setting things up. Zaz is going to just tell us all there is no mental illness. That's what the real Thomas Zaz did. So we will vote on things. And then again, like writing, all you need to do is write your speeches. It gives you sample language for how to write a proposal. It's like unnecessarily fancy, but this is how they do it. So whereas be it resolved, right? And so this is actually one of the things that they resolved in 1969, which is that APA would support a woman's right to an abortion. Right, and so this is how that particular proposal actually was formulated. Some of you on your character sheets, it might include the actual proposal. Some of you might have to write it using this format. And then when you do your research or symposium reports, again, you don't have to turn in a paper, but you're going to be discussing these specific things. There are folks who are supposed to write research grants to try to get funding for certain things, and that is something that will be decided within the game, whether you get that or not. And then me, again, I'm just here to like help you make sure things run properly. So this gives you a general outline of what we'll see, but there will be other people who want to talk about other stuff within these. And so again, we usually kind of get to 1973, depending, we might get all the way through. And so these are the various members of the board of directors. And this tells you, okay, so like, if this person was president-elect, then they'll be president the next year. So whoever we elect in 1971 to be, or sorry, 1972 to be president-elect will be president in 1973. It's a little weird and confusing, so this is very helpful. Yeah. Yeah. There was a research committee. If you're supposed to be on that, you review those research proposals. So here are the folks who are on that. There's a nomenclature committee that is supposed to be, again, looking at the DSM. And these are the folks that are initially on that. The program committee, again, we can chat and see how much you want to help put together the program. If you all are like, yeah, we want to do it, I could turn it over to you, but I'm also, like I said, very willing to do it myself. And then these are the members of the committee. Basically, I've just kept the same members of the committee the whole way through, and that's been fine. There are some nice definitions of what the various folks are. And what a symposia is, things like that. What are the research grants? How do you do that? How do you make your proposal? All that good stuff. And again, initial conference schedules that will change as other people submit things. So this is the public character information that you can know about other people, basically, beyond, like, again, they'll have secret stuff on their sheets, but these factions that I've put on your assigned chart get into some of this. So psychoanalysts they're sort of like two sub factions, but basically they're gonna be psychoanalysts. They're gonna say, you know, all the stuff we've talked about when we talked about Freud is what's causing mental illness. Right. All this good stuff. You can all look at it later. Psychoanalysts might talk about psychoanalytic treatment, right? And the importance of that. All the elements of that. There's a little bit about Jungian analysis as well. So behaviorisms, the behaviorists are going to be looking at, again, their own parts of philosophy. They don't care about what's going on in the brain. They're very Skinnerian in that way. They want to study the organism and its environment, whether that organism is a rat or a person. And the principles of learning are generalizable across species. So they're going to focus in on learning mechanisms that we've talked about. The cognitivists reject that we can't talk about the mind. They don't want to go back to introspection or psychoanalysis. They want to scientifically study the brain, basically, and what happens in there. And so there's a little bit of background there. And then here are the folks who are in the game. Some of them on here we don't have, most of the ones up at the top. We will have, but this tells you who are the behaviorists, who are the cognitivists, who are all these independent folks. Like, let me see. I don't think we have a Milgram. I think he was lower on the list than we could get. Yeah. We do have a Piaget. We obviously have a Zaz. We don't have a Zimbardo either. You all know about ethics and research, right? And so that goes into whether research proposals will be accepted. Again, you can read all these if they're relevant here. There's like a big history of psychology that I think is probably too detailed, but this guy really seemed to be into psychological history, so good for him. Here we go. This is very helpful. So the APA had membership for women. Back in 1894, Christine Ladd Franklin and Margaret Washburn actually joined. They did the first couple years have to try to infiltrate, like they literally dressed up like men or like hid under conference tables so they could listen to things. But then they were able to get in, and APA had its first female president in 1905. So APA does have a history of good gender representation. It's not great with race. So Kenneth Clark is one of our characters who's going to run for president. I believe that was the first time an African-American psychologist ran for president of the APA. So the APA had declared you can't talk about people without knowing them, things like that. Some of the stuff we still talk about today. There's a nice history of like how the DSM got started. How did we get to how we classify things today? One of the talks I saw at the conference over the weekend was actually a psychiatrist who's on the he's one of the main people organizing the revision for DSM-6. And one of the things he was talking about is for like the past 3 DSMs, they've been totally independent of like causes of disorders. And they want to try to get back to some of that because there are some like clear biomarkers for some of these disorders. Really interesting. Again, probably too much detail, but if you're someone who's supposed to very specifically look at these things, it might be good to take a gander. It talks about like the initial DSM, and what were the disorders initially. Some of these have really ancient terms, some of them really map closely onto a lot of the stuff we still talk about today. But there used to be some really interesting terminology. Like the idea that they thought that like cyclothymia, which is like a low-grade bipolar disorder, was a personality disorder back in the day. Interesting to think about. Sexual deviation was a personality disorder. And again, horrific language like idiocy, imbecility. And then it gets into some of the more detail as we became more and more scientific. It's going to talk more about setting the stage for the game and where we are there. There's also some good background research about homosexuality in America. And it really relates to some of the folks in the game like Evelyn Hooker, Camney and Gitney. Linguistics, research. Again, some of this stuff y'all will know, right? Because you've been learning about research methods in every class ever in psychology, but some of this is in there. And then some of the appendices are filled in, some are not. but it gives you some nice indications. Other questions about things? Cool. All right, well, you do have about 5 minutes if you want to like start figuring out who you're supposed to connect with. If not, on Wednesday, we'll plan to have the whole 50 minutes for y'all to start connecting, start researching, and start talking to me one-on-one about things. And again, focus on Zoom. If you are able to be here in person, that will make your lives so much easier.